Well, it's Comic Drive with Hauss and Jake. Comic Drive is where I just talk to Jake about comics while we drive. Jake, do you know what events are? Comic events?
Things that happen, like the Flashpoint?
Yeah, Flashpoint is a good example, like where there's usually the big story that runs through, and then it has tie-ins. So, like Onslaught. Actually, Onslaught never had its own thing. It was kind of just in the X-Men. But like that, where there's like, oh, you know, Onslaught's doing this, and then Onslaught grabs all the Sentinels and reprograms them. And then in Spider-Man, Spider-Man's fighting a Sentinel, or like a big event where there's a bunch of tie-ins, and you know, you read the main series, but then all the extra stuff is in tie-ins and stuff like that. Or it doesn't have to be that, I guess. It could just be an event, like Executioner Song went over, or Maximum Carnage went over the Force, or the Death of Superman. I'm coming up with examples here, left and right. But they cross over multiple comics, you know? Do you know what an event is?
Yes.
Yes. What's an event that you want to talk about today?
Oh.
I feel like I'm more in focus than you.
I don't know.
Folks, I'd like to remind you at home that we don't put any preparation into Comic Drive.
None.
Whatsoever, except for years of reading comics. My hope now that was Jake was going to be like, oh, let's talk about Atlantis Attacks, and I will be able to just impress everyone by talking about some random comic event without having prepared. Thank God he didn't say Atlantis Attacks, because I think Atlantis Attacked. It ran over annuals in Marvel one year. Also, Acts of Vengeance ran over all the annuals, and it was like villains just swapped. It was like, hey, Electro, you suck at beating Spider-Man, why don't you go fight the Punisher? I don't think that exactly happened, but it was stuff like that.
Because that's a good trade-off. You suck at fighting Spider-Man, so go fight a killer.
Yeah. Well, wasn't that particularly, but it was basically like, okay, our own heroes keep defeating the crap out of us. Like, I think it was like Red Skull was like, I always lose to Captain America. I think I will go fight the Fantastic Four. And hey, you Doctor Doom, why don't you go fight the X-Men? And Toad, go fight Spider-Man. It's the worst Red Skull impression ever, but anyway, what's an event? You want to talk about the Age of Apocalypse?
I mean, you can.
Okay. Do you know about the Age of Apocalypse, my friend Jake?
Just from what you've told me.
How do you not know about the Age of Apocalypse?
Because I haven't read it.
Oh my God, do you want to borrow the Age of Apocalypse?
Sure.
Okay. Oh.
I'm trying to get more into comics, but I haven't read a lot. So
okay. So
you ask me these questions, and I know nothing.
The Age of Apocalypse. I'm going to tell you a bunch of the Age of Apocalypse right now anyway. I'm still going to bring you the ones to read. The Age of Apocalypse. I absolutely adore the Age of Apocalypse. The Age of Apocalypse was the first trade paperbacks I started getting. They had these gold foil individual things, and I only have one left because the bastards that stole everything stole all of them, and I'm like, but I do have big collected ones, because Age of Apocalypse is one of those things where I'll buy multiples of, because I love the Age of Apocalypse. I love the concept of the Age of Apocalypse, and I love the execution of the Age of Apocalypse. As you were aware, Jake, my favorite Shrek movie is Shrek 4, where Shrek goes to a different timeline and things are different. Like Gingy is a fighter, he fights animal crackers in cages and stuff, and just everything is different. So I do love like an alternate history to see where things are different, like Flashpoint as well, right? The Flash wakes up, he's like, what? Somebody different is Batman? Superman's different? Like, I like to see where things wind up. There's a really good Captain America story. It was called Cap Lives, where Captain America still went into the ice, but he woke up, but the Germans had won the war. So it's to see where everybody was. Like, he teamed up with all these heroes that had created the resistance. And it's just nice to see things like that. So the Age of Apocalypse, I believe, might be what spurred that in me. I was not reading comics at the time, though. It was like 1994, 1995, right? X-Men are the X-Men. The X-Men cartoons are running. X-Men #1 by Jim Lee had come out. It's the best-selling comic of all time, yet to be surpassed, right? Like, X-Men were everywhere. X-Men were printing money. Printing money. You printed an X-Men comic, you were printing money. So what did we have? We had X-Men. We had Uncanny X-Men. We had X-Force. We had X-Factor. We had Wolverine. We had Cable had his own series. Like, just, there were X-Men books up the wazoo, because X-Men was
printing money.
There you go. X-Men was printing money. So let's go over a quick couple things here. What do you know about the X-Men? You know who Charles Xavier is?
Yes.
Okay, he founded the X-Men. You know who Magneto is?
Yeah.
He's kind of their main bad guy. Bishop?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the story of Bishop?
I don't know the story about him, but I know of him.
Yeah, so what you need to know about Bishop is he's from the future. Like Xavier Security Enforcers with the XSE. Anyway, he was from the future, and he came back to stop someone who would betray the X-Men, but he didn't know who, and I think he thought it was Gambit. At the end, I think it was Onslaught. Oh, Xavier betrayed the X-Men. Anyway, Bishop basically was from the future, displaced in time. Okay? That's what you know about Bishop. Do you know who Legion is? Is it really unrelated?
I don't think so.
Legion is, there's a whole series about him. It's actually pretty good. TV series. Anyway, Xavier's son, David Haller, he's got like multiple personalities, and each personality has a different power. And he's actually a really neat character on his own right. Anyway, for the sake of this...
He's the one who says, we are Legion.
Maybe. For the sake of this story, Legion is just Xavier's son. And he gets powers, and he's going to go back in time and kill Magneto. He's like, screw this guy. Magneto sucks. He's caused us a lot of problems. We're going to go back in time and end Magneto before he does anything. And the X-Men catch wind of that and they're like, oh, we got to go stop him. So they send back Psylocke and Storm and Iceman and Bishop. Right? And they're back there. And there's also something going on with like the Mcron crystal or something. I can't remember exactly. And long story short, the X-Men go back and they're like, oh, I forget what's happening. So they're like, this is weird. And Storm's like, I'm an African-American woman with white hair. That's weird. And Psylocke's like, yes, and I'm in an Asian body with a British accent. That's weird. And Iceman's like, oh, I can shoot ice. So that's weird. So they know something's up. Anyway, Legion goes and he's like, hey, Magneto, you suck. And Magneto's like, my name's not Magneto yet. I'm just Eric Lencher. He's like, whatever, I'm going to kill you. And he goes to kill Magneto. And Xavier, this is back when Magneto and Xavier were palling around. Xavier is about 20 years before the foundation of the X-Men. Xavier jumps in the way and gets killed. And then right away, Legion is like, ooh, that's my dad, and I killed him before I'm born. I screwed up. And he's like blinked out of his existence. And then the other X-Men are like, bloop, they're shot out of the way, and the time is being reset. And then like there's this time wave that is wrecking everything on the way to the future. And there was this whole thing. It's like Xavier and Jean Grey and Cable, I'm just remembering it now, were like in this big apparatus and they were all tied in so their minds could project somebody's mind back in time to remind the X-Men what they were supposed to do or something. I can't remember. Because the Legion Quest is not the best, but it's what led to the Age of Apocalypse. Much like the Flashpoint gave birth to the New 52, Legion Quest led to the Age of Apocalypse. So then what happened was time deleted and caught up, and the X-Men as we know it were wiped out. They were all like, oh, Scott, oh, I love you, said Jean, or whatever. And Wolverine's like, but I love Jean too. And just like, and they're showing us everybody. Like, you see Archangel with his metal wings, because that's what he had at the time from Apocalypse, and his blue face. And it's just, you see basically the status quo of X-Men. And Xavier's like, I'm proud of all of you. Our reality's ending. This sucks. The Avengers and Spider-Man all went on just fine, so I don't know how they handled it. Well, I'll tell you more about that later. Anyway, time, wiped out, done. And then Marvel did the unthinkable. Every X book was canceled. There was no next issue of X-Men. There was no next issue of Uncanny X-Men. There was no next issue of Wolverine. They stopped. But what happened the next month and for the next 4 months, which I think would have been great if they actually waited a couple months, but it was probably all in the solicits and everything, so people knew it was coming. The next month was Age of Apocalypse Alpha, which was like this introduction in this first one. And then from there it went on to, instead of X-Men, we had Astonishing X-Men. Instead of Uncanny X-Men, we had like Astounding X-Men. Instead of X-Force, we had Gambit and the Externals. Instead of Wolverine, we had Weapon X. Instead of Cable, we had X-Man. Instead of Excalibur, we had Excalibur, which is like a gun caliber. Excalibur was another X-Men book that I forgot to mention at the beginning. And they all had, just everything was vastly different because it was the Age of Apocalypse. So what happened now, as we learn in X-Men Alpha, Xavier was died. Xavier was died? Xavier was killed. So his dream, he never went on to found the X-Men. And the idea was if he didn't go on to found the X-Men, the original X-Men never split off and became X-Factor and never stopped Apocalypse when he first showed up in X-Factor number 6. I think is the general gist of it, although I think obviously more had to be wrong with the world for the world to be the way it was. And Apocalypse is the Lord Ruler of the United States, the world pretty much. It's the Age of Apocalypse. Mutants are fucking great, pardon my language. Mutants are great, and humans are the outcasts, basically. And mutants are the ruling class, but it is, like, bad. It's not a place you want to live. There is a team of X-Men, and they are led by Magneto. And he has the X-Men. And the X-Men, it's like Quicksilver and Storm and, like, Dazzler and Sunfire, who looks awesome. Everybody got cool-ass redesigns, and like, there's just Rogue and Magneto are together, and they have a child. And like Iceman is there and he's cool. Cyclops works for Mr. Sinister, who's one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse, and he's missing an eye. And there's a whole story how Wolverine is missing a hand, and he like was fighting Cyclops, I think, over Jean Grey, obviously. And you know, he took out Cyclops' eye, but not before Cyclops took out his hand. And he capped it with like an adamantium stub, so he would always be reminded of it. And it's just all these things. And then Bishop, of course, Bishop had his memories back from the 3 telepaths reaching through time. And Bishop had his memories back, and he remembered, but since he was already displaced in time, he didn't get wiped out and reset with everything. So Bishop lived another 20 years in that world that he knew was wrong until the time when he found the X-Men and was like, we gotta do this. And it's just, everybody is different. Like I said, Cyclops is a bad guy-ish, and he's got long hair and he's missing an eye. Beast is Dark Beast. You know about Dark Beast, right?
Yeah.
Dark Beast is from the Age of Apocalypse. Oh, Generation X. Gen X was also a title. It was Generation Next. And it was like Colossus and Shadowcat were like teaching the kids in the school and stuff like that. Oh. Jake needs his camera time. Yeah. And Gambit and the Externals. And then it was like, okay, we all got to come with this team, and they had to go fight Apocalypse and stop Apocalypse. Also, X-Man. You know X-Man? No? Okay. He's an alternate version of Cable. So Cable became X-Man, and X-Man was Nate Gray. And he was he's very, 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 very strong telepath. Mr. Sinister created him from the genes of Cyclops and Jean Grey. Whereas Cable is the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, who was a clone of Jean Grey. And then Cable is a very powerful telepath, but he is infected with a techno-organic virus, and he uses a lot of his power just to hold that at bay. So Nate Gray was made from Jean Grey, not a clone of Jean Grey. And then he is basically Cable with more pure genetics, I guess, and not the techno-organic virus. So he is just unleashed. And the whole thing with that is like he's the one to be able to take down Apocalypse. And Angel runs a bar. I think it's called the Heaven. But maybe it's the Sanctuary. But it's just, you see him, and all of a sudden he's got feather wings and white skin, and just, he does something really cool where he ties a bomb to his chest and blows up part of Apocalypse's tower. I'm getting really excited. Anyway, I don't know a lot of the ins and outs. And then there's also X Chronicles, which was telling some of the stories of earlier days where Scarlet Witch got killed because she was part of the Age of Apocalypse X-Men team. And there's also X Universe, which like follows Gwen Stacy and like all these other heroes that never became heroes because of it. But it doesn't really tie into the story that it's not essential. There's also Tales from the Age of Apocalypse. Oh, and then the Age of Apocalypse went on, and the Exiles. Oh, Blink is part of the Age of Apocalypse. Sabretooth is one of the X-Men in the Age of Apocalypse, and Sabretooth is awesome. And Sabretooth and Blink, of course, both went on to go to the Exiles. And the Exiles revisited the Age of Apocalypse, and there was another miniseries that revisited the Age of Apocalypse. I think the Age of Apocalypse became an ongoing series for a while that I actually didn't read, but then other characters like Nightcrawler came over, and Iceman came over. Like, Nightcrawler was on regular 616. X-Force for a while, and Iceman came over and he's like, look at how powerful I am, and
Bye.
anything can happen on Comic Drive Shorts.
That's not short.
Yeah. Anyway, Age of Apocalypse is great.
So I should read it.
Yeah. Well, then like Gambit, and everybody's like, okay, we all got these parts to play, and Gambit like was in love with Rogue, obviously, but then she went with Magneto, so he's like, screw that, and he left the X-Men, and he's got this team of Gambit, the Externals, and he has to go to space and get a chunk of the Imcron crystal because they can, basically, it's one of those, oh, something in my ear, it's one of those classic things where they're like, we're trying to stop Apocalypse at the same time, but we also do this, and we can reset time, because Bishop says time isn't what it's supposed to be. If we can fix this so this world never happens, we're going to do that. Spoiler alert, they do.
Do they get to kill Apocalypse though?
Oh yeah, I don't know. They take care of him.
They defeat alter time, and that's what defeats.
Oh no, it's because they defeat Apocalypse, and then like they're supposed to erase the reality from ever happening because it's a different timeline. But then it does become a different reality. But that was the whole thing in Exiles. Everybody on the Exiles, which I could talk about for even more time, the Exiles were all like, "Oh, you are displaced from your reality," and blah blah blah, and like, "Oh, you know, Morph, if you go back, you're just a liquid form and you're in a jar in Beast's lab and you are stuck in a coma in a hospital, blah, blah, Blink. Sorry, if you screw up and you have to go back, your timeline doesn't exist. You just don't exist anymore." So it's like, oh, well, that sucks. So she doesn't want to do that. But then it's later revealed that the Age of Apocalypse did continue on. And it's like, it's very different after that. And that's why I wasn't quite as into it. But like Professor Magneto's like the leader, and he's like, I run the world properly, and blah 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 blah. And it's just not as exciting. But half the fun is just seeing the alternate versions of people and what they would become or could have become. Anyway, there's 4 Horsemen: Abyss, Mr. Sinister, Holocaust, who is one of Apocalypse's son, and then Mikhail Rasputin, who's Colossus' brother. Now, he's not actually in the story much at all. He just kind of runs Europe, and he's part of that story with the X universe, the superheroes that never became heroes, like Ben Grimm and the Hulk and Gwen Stacy. There's a what-if tale where Quicksilver and Gwen Stacy hooked up. How cool is that? How cool is that? If the Age of Apocalypse hadn't ended, Quicksilver and Gwen Stacy would have hooked up. What an odd pairing, but why not? Sure. It's just neat. That's a neat, fun fact. Gwen Stacy. Because obviously Gwen Stacy didn't die in the Age of Apocalypse because there was no Green Goblin to throw up a roof. Although Norman Osborn, I think, is in there at one point. Norman Osborn and the Owl are just like, we're humans, but we use technology, and we're bad guys. Anyway, a little ago, when I started talking, I had a really good place to wrap this up without going too much into the story, because I have forgotten a lot of details, so I might read Age of Apocalypse before lending it to you. But it was just really so cool at the time that they just stopped all their books and started brand new books. And X-Man kept going. X-Man survived. X-Man, Dark Beast, and the Sugar Man all found ways. The Sugar Man, who was just... If you had to not read something from the Age of Apocalypse, don't read Generation Next, because...
Because of the Sugar Man?
The Sugar Man is just...
Gross?
He's gross and uncomfortable, and it's like... very clearly even worse than they were depicting him because of words that I'm not saying on YouTube and they couldn't print in the comics. But he enjoyed children. It's very clear. It's very clear. He is the Sugar Man. And I haven't read Generation Next as much because I just don't like the Sugar Man.
But it's probably a great story. It's just the Sugar Man.
No. There's one really good point where like Colossus' sister is there, and they thought she was dead, and they rescue her from these pits because there's just pits where they're putting humans sometimes, and they rescue her, and Colossus goes on a mad rage and tries to get to her, and they gotta calm him down, and Shadowcat is like, because they're married, he's like, oh, I'll stand in front of him and calm him down, it's fine, and I won't even phase because I know he'll stop. And so she doesn't phase, and he runs right through her and crushes her skull because he's just so enraged.
Does he even know that he did that?
He realizes he did it, and he's like, oh, and actually, Quicksilver or Gambit end up having to kill him. Like,
well, he's going that crazy then.
oh yeah, I gotta read. Well,
They
he
have to
just
stop
killed
him.
his own wife. I think he realized if they reset time, his sister would be dead instead of being alive or something. Maybe that's what it was. Clearly, I wasn't prepared for this conversation. I seem pretty prepared enough anyway. Not to pat myself on the back. The Age of Apocalypse is just absolutely awesome. It's just great. Like I said, it was X-Men, it was printing money, they completely just changed everything.
Just like that.
And they just
Drop
stopped.
up a dime.
Yeah,
Just
like I
changed
said,
it all.
it was obviously well planned and all well thought out and brought up and stuff, but they just canceled every X-Men book. And I mean, they picked them right back up with the old numbering again. Like, so nothing was lost.
That's cool
And
that
something
they
was
did that,
gained
though.
because they came out of that. Cable started back up with the numbering it had, and X-Men continued on. It's just cool.
Neat.
The Age of Apocalypse. So I will bring you some Age of Apocalypse books.
I have to read this. Sounds like a good story.
It's so Anyway, that's been Countdown Shorts. Did y'all like the Age of Apocalypse?
I did.
You haven't read it, Jake.
No, but he just told me everything.
Yeah, no, I didn't tell you everything. There's so much more. And if you say you liked it and you haven't read it, in the comments, I'll know. I will know.
I wasn't ready for this.
I won't know. I have no way of knowing what you've read and what you haven't. My buddy Bryce from high school comments. I know he read it, I think. Oh, geez, I don't know. I only know what I've read and what Jake's read. So,
Not much.
if you want to lie to me in the comments, that's fine. That is fine. Hit like if you want to lie in the comments.